Shavua Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bava Metzia. We are up to Perek Zayin Mishnah Dalid. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'ilu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burchai Israelov, Chana ben Miriam, Sason ben Ryan, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, and Avdi ben Chaim L'Chaim v'Derefua Shelemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, B'toch Shah Cholei Yisrael, and Dachlama Merav Binyamin, Or Tzion Chai ben Dvorah. The Mishnah begins, Hayar said, Bit'enim lo yochal ba'anavim. If a worker was working with figs, he may not eat from his employer's grapes. Ba'anavim lo yochal bit'enim. If he was working with grapes, he may not eat from his employer's figs. He may only eat from the type of produce he is working with. Even if he was hired to work with both figs and grapes, he may eat from each type of fruit only while he is currently working with it. However, a worker may restrain himself from eating until he reaches an area of better quality produce and eat his fill from there, even though he will therefore eat more of the better fruits than he would have if he had also eaten from the inferior fruits. The Mishnah discusses when a worker may eat from the produce. Regarding all workers, the sages said that by Torah law, they may eat from their employer's produce only while they are actually working. However, in order to prevent owners, from suffering a loss due to their workers eating while they work, which will cause them to do less efficient job, Amru, the sages decreed, that workers may eat while they walk from one row to the next row, meaning when they finish harvesting one row of plants or grapes and are walking to the next row to continue their work, and when they are coming back from the wine press to harvest the next load of grapes. After workers harvested a load of grapes, they would bring the grapes to the wine press and then return to the vines to harvest more grapes. They may bring some grapes with them from the wine press to eat on their way back to the vines. Although at those times the laborers are not actually working with produce attached to the ground, the sages realized that an employer would prefer that his workers eat while they are walking back and forth rather than while they are actually working. Just as the Torah gave workers the privilege of eating produce they are working with, it teaches that if an animal is threshing produce, one is forbidden to muzzle it and prevent it from eating the produce. This is a verse in Dvarim, chapter 25, verse 4. The Mishnah discusses the extent of this prohibition. Ubachamog shi poreket. As for a donkey, if it is carrying a load of food, one must allow it to eat from that food until it is unloaded, because the prohibition to muzzle an animal while it works applies not only when an animal threshes, but even when it carries food on its back. Now, although the Torah states that it is forbidden to muzzle an animal while it threshes, in which case the produce is at the animal's feet where the animal can see it, the same applies even when an animal is carrying a load on its back. Even though it cannot see the food, one may not prevent it from eating it. And that is in a Mishnah Dalid. Mishnah discusses how much produce a worker may eat while he works. Ochel poel kishut afilu bedinar. A worker may eat a cucumber, even if it is worth a dinar. A dinar was a considerable amount of money. V'chotevet afilu bedinar. And he may eat a date, even if it is worth a dinar. Certain types of dates and cucumbers were expensive foods in the time of the Mishnah. A worker was allowed to eat from his employer's produce, may eat as much as he wants, subject to the rules taught in the previous Mishnayot, no matter how much the produce is worth. The Mishnah cites two other opinions. Rabbi Elazar Chisma Omer, Rabbi Elazar Chisma says, Lo yochal poel yater al scharo. A worker may not eat an amount of produce worth more than his wages for the day. Rabbi Elazar derives this law from a verse in the Torah. V'chachamim matirin, but the sages say that a worker is permitted by law to eat as much as he wants. However, we teach a person not to be a glutton, because if a worker will eat too much, he will close the doors of employment before himself, meaning people will refuse to hire him. The Tanna Kama, on the other hand, holds that a worker should be allowed to eat as much as he wants, up to the amount of his wages. One should not tell a worker to cut back on his eating, because if he's hungry, he might not work as well. And the Rav tells us, V'alacha ki chachamim, the halacha follows the opinion of the sages. And that is an abotai to this Mishna Yomi. Everybody should have a Shavua Tov. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.